ICICI Lombard and CNBC-TV18 present India Risk Management Awards, Risk Masterclass.
Now, if the past year has taught us one thing, it is that the traditional approach to risk management simply does not work. The global pandemic fundamentally challenged how companies identified, assessed, managed, and monitored risk, tossing aside long-held beliefs around security, IT resiliency, crisis management, to name a few. It's also important that the crisis and resilience teams integrated the lessons learned from 2020 to maintain a higher degree of flexibility and agility in responding to as well as anticipating the continuous curveballs thrown their way. Now, this can only be done effectively by leveraging the right data and technology tools. So today's masterclass focuses on the service sector and how enterprise risk is being redefined in a post-COVID-19 environment. First up on the show now, I would like to welcome Sahil Kangotra, Vice President Corporate Solutions Group, ICICI Lombard, to share his insights into how risk intelligence can be framed for faster executive action. Sahil will also talk about risk mitigation measures companies need to take to prepare themselves for such black swan events.
In recent times, all sectors have been impacted pervasively by COVID-19. Within service sector, there are few sectors like IT, banking, which has been suffered a little lesser as compared to hospitality, hotels, travel, which has been affected extensively. The pandemic situation has surely created crisis, but it has also helped us prepare for such exposures in future. From a risk management perspective, COVID will represent a shift from frequent risk identification to great risk management. In the past, lack of data was a big issue, but today the necessary data is already available with us, which can help us prepare for the future. Companies which would be agile, more adaptive, will surely succeed in future. For a long time, managing enterprise risk has been viewed as a compliance exercise and many a times only to fulfill bankers' requirements. The immediate lesson of the crisis is that the process in itself must be dynamic and should be owned by the board of all the organizations. So the entire thing needs to be reinvented, and I'm sure India risk managers are ready to lead this change. So how do we see risk change in future? In my opinion, I believe proactive risk management will become top management's priority. On-demand insights and real-time reporting will replace spreadsheets. The interdependence of threats will be essential, as one event can have far-reaching impact across the entire organization. A small cyber attack can lead to business disruption. It can lead to business continuity, supply chain disruption, a huge financial loss to the company, goodwill loss, and so on. In this environment of cascading risk, having a 360-degree view would be of great importance. You need to look at all the threats across domains and understand how they are interconnected and take subsequent measures. We at ICICI Lombard believe that we must act as risk advisor for our clients, and along with the right product, we continuously work toward mitigating losses through value-add services. For several sector clients, we work closely with their IT teams on cyber risk to see how well they are prepared when there is an actual cyber attack. We also work with their HR teams on unique wellness offerings to ensure overall health of the organization. This surely would lead to less absenteeism and lower hospitalization.
Thank you, Sahil, for those valuable insights. Next, I would like to invite our keynote speaker for the evening, Santosh Kumar Nair, partner, Deloitte India. And Santosh will be sharing with us the top risk factors which impacted the service industry over the last year and also his company's top risk management strategies.
It is perfunctory these days to start any conversation on risk management with a mention of the pandemic. So let me do that as well. 2020 has been a watershed event in our lives. Default settings for all of us has changed. Nothing that we do or nothing that we know applies equally well anymore, and risk management has been no exception. What is also important is enterprises like never before have realized the importance of resilience. That is their ability to withstand unpredictability, to deal with such unpredictable events, and to thrive in such uncertain environments. For the longest of times, enterprises have been focused on short-term earnings and related objectives. And this has been based on the assumption of smooth and consistent operation. And we know that the pandemic was a wake-up call for all of us. The pandemic really rang a bell and challenged these assumptions on consistent, smooth operating environment, if you will. We at Deloitte did a survey towards the end of 2020. We covered close to 200 global enterprises and 2,000 CXOs. And 6 out of every 10 respondents seem to indicate that the pandemic is not an outlier, which is not surprising considering what we have gone through, which means that 60% of the respondents believe that such occurrences are par for course. They will continue to happen in the future and probably happen at a much higher frequency. So in a world which is changing rapidly, which is complex and disruptive, risk response time is extremely critical, right? Because once the risk onsets, the velocity of such risks is going to be so high that the enterprises may not have enough time to respond. And the hallmark of a good resilient framework is that enterprises will be able to cut down on that response time and will be able to respond to such emerging threats in a much more agile and proactive manner. So if we look around us and we look at the last couple of years, especially during the pandemic and post-pandemic, you will see that the successful organizations are the ones which have had a highly effective resilience programs. And these are all entities which made early investments in their resilience activities, their resilience framework, and their resilience program. And these entities have benefited because they've converted these crisis events into sustainable competitive advantage. As someone famously once said, never let a crisis situation go waste. Capitalize on it. And companies which have got these resilience frameworks have definitely capitalized. Now, what do we mean by effective resilience frameworks? I think there are two parts to an effective resilience framework. One is the ability to anticipate, and the second and equally important is the competency to respond. And that is where risk intelligence frameworks come into play. Now, risk intelligence frameworks, like every other framework, is built upon people, process, technology. I'm a firm believer that process and technology are the easier parts. It is easily available. Most companies have access to it and hence can be implemented fairly quickly. But unless organizations get their people aspect correct, it is very difficult to have an effective and resilient risk management program. Remember, risk intelligence is not just about value preservation. It is now more about value enhancement and value creation. Thank you all for your time. Have a good day ahead.
Thank you, Santosh Kumar Nair, for sharing with us your valuable insights and strategies.
ICICI Lombard and CNBC-TV18 present India Risk Management Awards, Risk Masterclass.
Next up on the show, we have our panel discussion. So let's welcome our esteemed guests who are waiting in the wings, so to speak, and bring them on board, starting with Saurabh Lal, CFO at AGS Transact, Manoj Rane, Partner Head of India, Psionic India, Sanjay Datta, Chief Underwriting, Reinsurance and Claims, ICICI Lombard, Kamal Kakkar, CFO of Thales India, and Bhaskar Anand Rao, CFO, Bangalore International Airport. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on the show. Right, so let's talk about enterprise risk management and how companies are orienting both themselves, their own strategy, and how they are addressing it with their clients. And let me start with Sanjay Datta, who is the Chief Underwriting and Reinsurance and Claims at ICICI Lombard. Sanjay, for a large conglomerate such as yourself and somebody who looks at risks so closely, Please share with us your thoughts about how both internally as a company and externally to your clients, are you taking a real look at, enterprise risk management in the post-COVID era?
No, I think no one anticipated the pandemic. And to the scale of the, issue, the scale of the risk which unfolded, nobody was aware of this. So let's give it to ourselves that no one had this on their particular, in terms of the ERM plan. But how people responded was the key issue, as you correctly asked. And we, since we dealt with different sectors, we found that, apart from the usual sectors which got affected because of, the pandemic directly affecting, which is basically travel and various other businesses, airlines and all that, getting shut down because of the pandemic. The other businesses, were able to, in a sense, deal with two issues. One is this whole issue of shutdown. And this was the first case where the entire thing was shut down not due to natural catastrophe per se, where there was physical damage. The entire shutdown was due to something which was non-physical in nature.
So, Lal, let me come to you because you're the CFO of AGS Transact. You're, one of the largest payment solution providers to banks, to corporates, particularly, for instance, we all know as far as your ATM services are concerned. How quickly were you able to reorient? What were some of the major trends that you observed, and how are you preparing for the future?
I think what Sanjay was absolutely correct. No one was prepared for this kind of catastrophe. But definitely, as you rightly said, we were part of this industry, which is a financial industry, where the business continuity plan plays a very, very critical role the moment such kind of instances happen. But as he rightly also said, the economy was completely shut down. The physical movement was actually next to impossible. So definitely the moment that lockdown was announced, which was, I could remember, it was around 24th, 25th of March 2020, and everyone was not prepared or geared. It was a one-day lockdown, which immediately was moved to 21 days of lockdown with the next working day. And as you rightly said, we are part of the banking industry where we have to replenish the ATM on daily basis. We have to process the transactions with respect to all the banks and other transactions on daily basis. It was not an easy task for us, but definitely, as you rightly said, I would say the need is the mother of all the invention. So immediately, our ground staff was there, our custodians, our engineers, the SOPs were tweaked immediately. We got into hygiene mechanism where ATM had to be filtered, checked, the transactions had to be processed. The work from home structure was not a part of the routine businesses. The work from home structure was created immediately from the next day onwards. The technology was brought into picture, and this helped us to navigate those times.
Let me go with that thought to somebody who perhaps represents the hospitality or rather the travel space, and that's Bhaskar Anand Rao. As the CFO of Bangalore International Airport, which is one of the busiest and perhaps also one of the best managed airports. One of the things which is said is that companies, used to perhaps pay lip service when it came to risk management, as in they would have some sort of a team or some sort of a plan in place, but not really perhaps do more than that. In that sense, how did you as a company face this, calamitous situation, not just of the pandemic, but of completely your business drying up? And when the second lockdown came, you had, of course, some part of your business continuing to run with all the additional protocols and costs and investments involved.
Thank you, Paramita. I mean, you're absolutely right. We are one of those severely impacted sector by the COVID-19 pandemic. Airlines and aviation sector have always been tightly managed, but this pandemic has taught us quite a few things. It's exposed some areas of risk which we were unprepared for, in a sense that, as you know, aviation business was growing at a phenomenal speed in India, and almost everybody was on expansion speed. Not only the airports, but even airlines and cargo. Everybody were increasing their capacity, increasing their capabilities. We got to be very conscious about all these risk parameters. But however, there were new risks that we suddenly were faced with. One was, the topmost I would say was a sudden traffic reduction, and also drying up of, and you rightly mentioned, the drying up of the aeronautical and non-aeronautical streams of cash flow
revenues, it's led to quite a lot of cash flow stress. From a double-digit growth number, we were suddenly in a situation where 80% of our revenues were down. The resulting stress on cash flow became one of the biggest risks of the industry. And the lockdown and travel restrictions imposed by states, fear of infection, brought this sector, and along with this sector, as you rightly mentioned, the hospitality and travel sector also to its knees and almost a grinding halt. So this was one of the key risks that we suddenly had to grapple with. For us, there was no work from home for majority of our employees. And so we had to deal with new protocols, new procedure, so that they are comfortable coming back to work. And
absolutely,
the employees really made our staff were tremendous in that actually.
As individuals, we may have been thinking, my God, the world has exploded, but at the same time, these critical services continued running, especially, during the second wave that we saw. So I think, Bhaskar, as you said rightly, that, your industry was perhaps the hardest hit, and cash flow became an important impediment, not just for the hospitality sector, but perhaps for many companies across verticals. Kamal Kakkar, you are representing Thales India, which is a multinational corporation. In that sense, would you say, being a multinational, were you able to leverage on some of the international support that you got, from your parent company, and how were you able to mitigate some of those risks? First, what were the risks that you faced in the domestic market? And did the fact that, as a multinational, were you able to get additional support and hence some stability during the pandemic?
The support coming from the parent group, and there I can say that in terms of the captive business, which our Indian legal entity is engaged into, we were quite active into continuing our business support towards our the fellow entities abroad, wherever there was a lesser or a not very significant impact was there in the businesses. We were continuing to support on those geographies, like in the engineering services. Then coming to the challenges within India, well, looking at the demography of top line, we have the services in form of the support, the engineering, and then the project management. So we were kind of in I would say, a more responsive mode towards the domestic challenges, where we were looking at that there are the critical activities where it is absolutely not possible to do work from home support, example on the project management aspect. And there how we were able to respond to those challenges. And then apart from the other support services, there we were able to continue our services in a way which I would say with the help of customer and also with the help of suppliers, wherever we can able to support in a more practical way, which is because everybody was more or less in the same situation.
So on that note, let me go across to Manoj Rane. Manoj, as head of, Psionic India, you're looking as a financial services consulting firm. How do you react to some of the observations that have been made so far in the discussion, and particularly use it as a lens for the future?
All risks do not sit on the balance sheet, or key risks do not only sit on the balance sheet. And to that extent, I think COVID was a great eye-opener. You suddenly realize that sometimes the logistical risks were far higher than what financial risks presented. There were issues relating to mental health. There were issues relating to human resources. There were issues relating to working from home. There are instances where certain parts of the businesses and banks cannot be done from home. There are security issues. Trading, for instance, is one. Derivatives writing is another, and so on and so forth. But you had to find a solution. Once you moved home, you wrestled with issues like, is the data speed fast enough? You have people living in the distant suburbs in, Vasai, for instance. Do they have, sufficient electricity or round-the-clock electricity? there have been different approaches to this. Different institutions have dealt differently. One institution has given inverters to their employees, and of course, laptops have become omnipresent from typical desktops, which a lot of us in offices use.
Very interesting, I think, insight. And let me go across, back to Sanjay on this point. And Sanjay, how are you sort of taking a relook at risk, both risk which is on the balance sheet and risk which is off the balance sheet? Do you think companies need to sort of establish a team with multiple heads reporting to senior management? I mean, what's the form that the future of risk management is going to take within companies, for instance, in the financial services space?
I think it's an interesting topic now we're getting into. How do we prepare for post the pandemic? The learnings from the pandemic. I think the one key thing is, of course, the whole risks are very integrated, and you have to look at it holistically is the key thing. The other thing I think which is coming through very strongly is that we need to be calm in the in times of crisis, and very agitated or very anxious during peace times. And it's time to be anxious now. How do you prepare for the next one? We can't we keep learning all the time on how to deal with the pandemic or economic and being integrated and all that. It's time to be very anxious now. That how we taking all the learnings and putting it into practice. So we I think all of you asked a question earlier. Of what's our learning from all the Indian sectors which we deal with. I think they were extremely calm. They dealt with the issues very heroically, if I may use that word, apart from the hospital sector, which of course were heroic. They all, just, found ways to, address the situation. And mind you, it was not the Indian word Jugaad. It was absolute very key, thinking on what is important and how do I take care of all these, including inverters and, employee safety and so many other things which came into the plate at one go. And we had to deal with it at one go. Having said that, coming back to your question, it's very important that that we integrate the sources of, build a framework very well. Then of course, you would need to, there will be times when everyone will not have everything in-house. You will need to get specialists in. So whether it's, IT risk or someone who's not very familiar with high-level IT risk, we need to get, specialists in.
Well, that's all the time we have for questions on Masterclass today. I would like to thank the audience and the guests for being a part of this very special session.
ICICI Lombard and CNBC-TV18 present India Risk Management Awards, Risk Masterclass. Focus, ideate, innovate, enable.